What is going on, guys? As promised, I'm going to show you how I personally have been using my X3 bar system, or just how you guys can take advantage of some loop style resistance bands, a board or foot plate, and then some sort of a bar. Compared to a variety of home fitness stuff I've been trying out over the last 3 or so years, namely, I've of course been focusing and training mostly on a total gym or Saudi men's trainer if you guys are new to this channel. This is one fitness product that has surprised me and actually has gotten me off this machine and actually been using this as a standalone workout, much more so than any other piece of equipment I've tried so far. So what I'm gonna be laying out here, guys, is a conceptual program that I'm dubbing a BBB program, or a bar, band, and board program. I know it's not the most clever thing in the world. And this is loosely inspired from the X3 program, which is definitely a good program in its own right, but this is personally how I've been using this type of setup. So I will lay out the nuts and bolts here for you guys in this video, but if you guys do want to help support me and get your own kind of PDF copy of this, I will make it available on my website and put a link down below in the description box. It'll be fairly simplistic, but also very affordable. Should cost you no more than what you guys would pay for a basic cup of coffee. Now, as far as equipment, of course, you're gonna need the basic fundamentals: resistance bands, some sort of platform, some bars. I did a bunch of videos talking about these things and reviewing them. I can link those down below in the description box, as well as a complete package of various equipment you guys can find available at your disposal. I got some good promo codes and discounts as well if you guys do want to help support me again, but I'll put down all sorts of price ranges. Of course, there is the basic X3 system, which I do personally like. Granted, this can be expensive, so that's why I'm giving you guys some other alternatives that actually could save you money, like cheaper barbells, cheaper bands, and even like a makeshift plate that I kind of had my neighbor Mac put together that I think is also really cool. I think it's worth covering this. People might ask questions why I particularly even like this setup, and there's really kind of 5 primary reasons. Because full disclosure, like many of you guys, you might have saw ads for this type of thing, and I was been very skeptical. I've used bands, of course, in the past. I'm like, how much of a difference is a bar and a foot plate really gonna make a difference in the grand scheme of things? But first and foremost, this certainly might be some personal preference, is that there's no anchor points involved, unless you count the actual foot plate being an anchor point, but there's no messing around with like door anchors. I personally don't like messing around with that. I don't wanna like damage my door. I also don't necessarily like working out in kind of a weird, just kind of a door space kind of environment. It's not the most inviting thing in the world. I like the freedom of resistance bands, but when I go outside and I gotta like anchor to a certain point, or there's like the kind of this feeling of always kind of leaning and fighting against the band, I personally just don't like doing that. I also don't like messing around with kind of changing up the bands kind of in weird kind of points. Just makes things a little more cumbersome. So having this foot plate system and also having a bar such as this one, where you can easily kind of slip the bands in and out, just makes things a little more simplistic, also makes the workouts kind of move a little more fluid. The second thing, which is definitely up there as a big reason why I personally use it, is the stimulus and stress just feels amazing on certain specific exercises. You're gonna be limited to some exercises because of this kind of setup, but I think the exercises that do work really well. And I was like people at first when I had this foot plate, having it kind of attached, I was going kind of at a faster tempo, which I think sometimes faster tempos can work with a given range of motion. But when this thing is done with a slower cadence and kind of working with really focusing on stress and not worrying so much about the ideal perfect range of motion, you really start to feel that, especially in things like biceps. I've been doing this thing for over a month, doing the basic bicep curl, and this thing never gets old. I get an immediate pump. So far, I've not gotten used to this exercise. So there's a number of exercises like this, and that's the primary reason why I've been jumping to this setup, because it just feels so good. And I've honestly just noticing some changes in my body the more I've been doing this. Third thing is it's very simplistic, not only in the way you can actually travel with this thing, go indoors and outdoors with it, but also the fact that it's just basic programming, working on some key fundamental exercises that are working, and you're just kind of driving home those things through repetitions and volume. The fourth thing would be the actual bar, namely these kind of shorter bars. I've used the Instar bar, and again, you got to use kind of carabiners, a little more cumbersome to kind of set up the bands, which kind of was a negative point. When I first got the X3 immediately, which I certainly saw pictures of this, and I'm like, well, how much of a difference is it really going to make? It's a big difference, especially using loop bands of just, again, so easily kind of slipping things in and out. I love the way this thing feels. Not everybody likes this shorter distance. I personally love it for a number of things. I love the knurling on this bar. Granted, this thing is very expensive. You can't buy it individually. There is the Harambe bar. I'll link that down below, which is definitely a close second you can buy individually. But even there's some cheaper options that have their weak points, but also can be somewhat acceptable for the basic functionality. And just that connection point and that stress that's built up by using a bar, for me, does seem to make a difference in the way of kind of feeling, kind of giving off stress on the various muscles versus, say, using kind of gloves. And the fifth reason is for me personally, because I use these Total Gyms and Sony Men's trainers, is that it's a great supplement to other machines and devices, especially something like this that does lack things in the lower body. So especially over this last month, I haven't been really doing any lower body, very minimal. On this machine, my lower body stuff has been geared towards just these band bar board setups, doing things like deadlifts and squats and some kind of drop step lunge combinations, as well as some calf raises, which should also work really well. Regardless, whatever kind of setup you're using, because it's such a small footprint, it's easy to kind of superstep between various exercises. So I love the way it kind of complements other things you guys would find in your home gym. All right, so getting into the basic workout template that I'm setting forth for you guys, it's gonna be following an upper lower body split. And I'm not gonna make so many direct comparisons to the X3, but this was certainly a little bit of inspiration. I always said before, I love their simplistic setup, which was a push day and a pull day. Now that is mixing in various kind of agonist and antagonistic body parts and some things, which I think is totally fine. I just personally prefer a pure upper body, pure lower body for the sake of giving proper recovery to each body part while still increasing the overall frequency and volume. Given the nature of this setup, I think the X3 bar system does a great job in giving you guys those foundational exercises and obviously utilizing the tool, especially like the shorter bar, with kind of what capabilities you guys have. However, I will make a distinction that, yeah, based on the ground plate that you guys have, there are some other versatile exercises you guys can take advantage of. If you're using something that's like really expensive, like a clench foot plate or the Harambia here, even my wooden foot plate, there are some exercises I do, like even the board press, that I can't really do adequately on the X3. So that did in some way influence the exercises that I chose and kind of the selections that I'm gonna set forth to you guys. The other big thing is they do recommend kind of doing one set for all these exercises to pretty much, I think, form failure or almost pretty much a muscle failure. I kind of like that, but I'm dialing up the volume. Again, nothing against what they're doing. Obviously, it's get results for a lot of people. For me personally, this might not work for you. I've dialed up the volume to a much higher degree. And I can just say for me personally, from doing that pretty consistently, I'm not noticing any negative consequences from doing that. I also just like the general workout. I don't like workouts to be that short. I like things to be a little bit longer. So again, that's also something of a personal preference. So overall, I'd say more weight, more volume, more frequency. I'm not making any hardcore promises. I think this is definitely a beneficial program to at least try out. It certainly is working for me, and that's why I'm sharing with you. I'm not gonna make any grandiose promises on something such as this. I'll also get to it towards the end as far as how you can kind of supplement this and work this into your schedule, because definitely this may or may not be something you wanna run kind of long term. So before we get into the exercises, I'm first gonna touch on the form, some band tension, and kind of some general thoughts on progression before I introduce all those exercises. With the form, before we get into exercises, I want you guys to really think about just not so much thinking about pure, textbook perfect form. Even things like shoulder presses. When I'm doing a shoulder press, we might think of like, oh, full extension, full lockout, driving it back in a certain range of motion, whether that's chest presses, even bicep curls. And this is for sure taking some suggestions from them and other resistance training individuals, but keeping that constant tension, not going too fast, and I would say not going too slow. The tempo is kind of up to you, but definitely not just ripping it, keeping that constant tension. But the main thing is just finding that groove that gives you that attention. So let's say you're doing a shoulder press from here and this kind of bothers your shoulder, maybe going back here, up here. Push a little bit more up front. I'm just saying find that rep range that keeps you in that constant tension. I'm not saying to totally always avoid lockout, because things when it starts getting to like heavy squats, to give myself some little break, to not getting too gassed, sometimes I will fully extend out to catch my breath a little bit and keep going down. But generally, I definitely find even for legs, if I just kind of keep that slow fluid movement, your heart rate's gonna be jacking up for sure, but you're gonna feel that tension also increase. So the point is, find a form, find a range of motion that works for you. The tension and stress is really kind of dialed up exponentially. And a large part of that has to go with the band tension. Now, sometimes you always think, well, the bigger band is always better, it always shows kind of more progress. I wouldn't always look at it that way. The more you guys do this, and for sure the bands are gonna stretch out over time, you're gonna notice your overall capacity and be able to handle a lot higher levels of volume will start increasing, your conditioning will increase, your strength will increase, but don't immediately think, well, I gotta jump up immediately from like a smaller band to a bigger band. Especially exercises like, for instance, bent over rows. I will not pick a super heavy band. Like I could do a bent over row with this, but this would be pretty tough, honestly. I'd rather get, even with going super small like this, getting more repetitions dialed in, increasing that stress and range of motion than I would kind of jumping in weight. So definitely jump around. I was even doing things like drop steps. You can do that as well, or the next set, adjusting the tension accordingly. The main thing I'm chasing isn't so much on progression on like jumping in weight. I'm always working on different tension and stress I feel in the muscles. So maybe that's increasing the weight for one particular set and lowering that repetition, and it might be kind of lowering the intensity or band tension or length and going into higher repetitions, low intensity. But don't get me wrong, there's gonna be a time and place in certain body parts like the legs, you might have to take it up a notch and get something like this. People have asked me, yeah, you could double band things, but based on the foot plate you got, that might kind of stack up the length and get kind of cut underneath the foot plate. So in which case you might want to get kind of bigger, thicker bands like the one X3 makes, or some Serious Steel makes some other big bands. So definitely consider that. I've noticed even with the bands I got now, I even want to up the grade to even higher density for things like squats. And you're going to be surprised again how strong you're going to get and how much conditioning you'll be building up to actually increase the band tension. Just easier to kind of slip these on, and if you want to add a little bit more extra tension, you can always add that on top of these instead of stacking multiple sets of bands. All right, getting into upper body exercises. You guys will see when I talk about upper and lower body exercises, I will have a sequence of some core foundational exercises I would always do or recommend, and then some assistance or optional exercise you guys can kind of supplement on top of that, either at the very end or mix it into the overall superset. These are more or less in my preferred order, but you guys could feel free to kind of mix up this order if you guys want. I tend to follow kind of one giant circuit where I'll do every exercise all the way through and then repeat them all the way through again for a number of sets. If you want to just stay on exercise to exercise, you could do it that way as well. All right, so the first exercise is going to be some sort of horizontal chest press. Depends on what your personal preference is and what your setup you guys have. You have the X3 bar. It works out good to kind of do these presses. Some people, not everyone really likes this. I initially didn't at first until I really started just getting in that groove, dialing in that tension, doing some drop steps in between that. But it would be this one and or you could say a foot plate or board press. You can't really pull this off on the X3. You could do it in the Harambe, the Clench Fitness, or even like my homemade board. To do something like that where you press it off the ground, that also feels pretty good. If you got a bar that's something like this Jay Bryant bar that has a little more extension, this does not feel as good with this. They do make 30-inch loop style resistance bands, which are shorter than the 41-inch. Companies like Harambe have that, and again, I have a promo code for them if you guys want to pick up their bands. So their bands are actually, would be good for something like this Jay Bryant bar that has this extra slack, so you don't have as much kind of tension on the initial pull-off, so that would be an option for you guys. Otherwise, the other exercise I would consider at least supplementing in there, which I certainly do, is just a very basic banded push-up. 9 times out of 10, I don't think you really have to go to your feet. I'll actually drop to my knees and just dial in. Same idea, keeping that constant tension, doing repetitions that way. I think that's also an excellent exercise. The next one is gonna be the bent over row, and you could say and or some other kind of horizontal anchored rows, or I even say an optional assistance would be the vertical pull-up. If you got like a cheap squat rack like I have, or a pull-up bar next to you, that certainly works out a nice kind of option thing to kind of superset in there, or is that assistance exercise. But foundationally, the bent over row is great. I love it. This would not be something that I traditionally in the gym or with dumbbells or even like with a total gym, I normally wouldn't be at that high of an angle doing that row, but I have found if I keep the tension really dialed in, even if it starts to get kind of somewhat fatiguing, I would still do those kind of forced reps at a higher kind of angle at my torso. Still feels really good, but then a lot of times I will jump down to a very easy, kind of easier weight like this and get a little more horizontal. So feel free to mix up those angles. The main thing again is you're kind of really focusing in that tension and stress on the back. Exercise number 3 would just be the resistance band overhead press. I love it. I think it feels good. I think I said in my initial review, I felt like that back tension a little bit, and that kind of went away just a little bit over time. Like as you're pressing overhead, that kind of compression feeling. I think if you go a bit slower and not kind of go crazy with the weight, again, I don't go super crazy. I might even use this light one or one that's slightly heavier. I definitely do not go that heavy with the shoulder presses. I'll get to the rep ranges and sets that kind of make sense. If this does aggravate your back, well, I think that's where the foot plate comes in handy, because I think when you don't have this, you feel it more in your back. I think over time, I think it'll get a little more conditioned, but otherwise just lower that band tension. And then with that range of motion, again, some people might need a wider bar for something like this, in which case I have the Instar bar here. I will link that down below. That definitely feels good as a good option for a shoulder press. But with this one personally, I really like it. If it does bother your shoulder in some angles, I always say it's not like maybe not the best answer for everybody, but if you have to kind of push out in front or shorten that range of motion that works for you, that's fine. But in general, I like to kind of think of kind of more or less going in a straight line so that when I finish, my biceps are even with my ears, but that's my personal preference. But you guys will notice I'm not fully even locking out. I'm just kind of slowly repping in this range of motion to keep that constant stress. Of course, the bicep curls. Sometimes I start with bicep curls. I'll just kind of throw these in here when it feels kind of comfortable between kind of like almost like supersets. These just feel honestly just amazing on various tensions. Tend to be a lighter tension, either the smallest band setting or second notch up, something like that. Find a tension that works for you. I'll get to that rep range in a second. I know the X3 system, they talk about doing the elbows back and doing drag curls. I would try that a little bit if you guys want to. I personally don't like it. I think the standard bicep curl, keeping the elbows kind of locked in, doing this arc and keeping the tension kind of dialed in for me, almost immediately on that first set will light up my arms. Granted, it could be the kind of the pre-workout stuff that I kind of take ahead of time, but it just lights me up. My arms have been sore, honestly. Not like sore where I feel like the next session, you shouldn't really feel that. But they get worked, I feel, adequately with that very basic exercise. And I would say fifth is somewhat optional. This one would be some sort of a tricep extension. I know X3 shows a variety of tricep extension. I saw some other people. Honestly, the only one that really works good if you don't have an overhead anchor point, because I use this for tricep extensions if I got my squat rack, but we're assuming if you got nothing here and you're outside, I would say, one, you don't have to really worry about it so much if you guys just are doing overhead presses and the chest presses. Honestly, I think you're gonna be working your triceps a little bit. And I should maybe say this as well, and I'll incorporate right here, that if you are doing things like shoulder presses with the chest presses, you are doing a lot of shoulder work, you can kind of emphasize one versus another a little bit more so you're not overworking a particular body part. So that's kind of up to you how you wanna mix those two up. But assuming you're doing a decent amount of chest pressing and overhead shoulder pressing, you're gonna be working the triceps pretty decently. However, if you guys don't have that, I have found that if I use the board press lying on my back, the Harambe would work, even the clench that has more of the vertical channels or the horizontal channels, you wanna say that way, you can anchor the board and do it like this. That to me is the best version of a tricep press down using this type of setup for me personally, where I really get nice adequate range of motion and tension for a fuller range of motion versus kind of starting something like this. I tried various recommendations people had, the way to kind of like string the bands around my back. I still just didn't feel like it was anywhere comparable. It was also less uncomfortable on your neck than using the basic plate, but again, you can't use it with the X3 plate. Certainly optional assistance ones, again, mix them at the very end or kind of throw them in sporadically. These are just, I say, kind of cake toppers, definitely assistance exercises. Shrugs feel really good. I haven't done shrugs in years. I only started recently doing them with this setup because it feels really good. I find it kind of moderate tension band, and I will just do shrugs here. Feels excellent. Another great one to do, since we're not doing a whole lot of, if you don't have an anchor point, kind of this AD duck in the shoulders, which is good for like lat pull downs. Since we're not getting a whole lot of that, you could do things with a smaller band and kind of do these kind of slow pulls down just like that. I might show you guys another video of this too, but keep tension kind of locked in as you guys are doing that. Again, we're essentially working this range of motion for like a pull up. Not perfect, but if you do with enough repetitions, enough intensity, keeping that tension stressed, should feel pretty good. The other one too is a very light, you could say kind of rear fly, horizontal AB duction opening up this way, but great exercise I think for most people. Again, it depends on the band tension you guys got, but just something like this, keeping constant tension, finding that range of motion that works for you, but great exercise to work those posterior deltoids, rhomboids, traps again. Just a great exercise for most people that tend to be weak in that area, and also helps supplement some of these exercises we don't necessarily hit as much. All right, now getting into lower body exercises. Compared to upper body, and especially how you're gonna be working your lower body, I don't think you need to do this as much, assuming because you're doing a lot of frequency. The only downside of working the lower body on this type of setup is the fact that it can definitely stress your back, especially when you start kind of pairing the deadlifts with the squats. And that might be why the X3 system kind of like alternates one of those with each other push and pull day. I still been doing it. I noticed at first, I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this because my back would kind of get kind of sore almost immediately if I paired them together. But it seems like over time, they seem to be kind of get a little more conditioned. I'm not worrying about it as much. What I tend to do is I might have more of a focus on one workout versus another throughout the week when I get to the lower body. So I might have a little more deadlifts, more or less squats. And there are some times, honestly, where I might throw in some light deadlifts just for kind of some repetitions, light kind of repetitions into my upper body workout. But the point is, I don't think if you go super crazy with this, don't worry about it. I might do a ton more volume in upper body, but when it comes to lower body, don't worry about like just dialing in these things super crazy. Of course, you can start out light. That's another easy way to kind of take that stress off the lower back. But I like to always start with the first one being the body weight squats, or I should say body weight squats, bar squats. You guys will see me, you've seen me kind of do, I more or less prefer to do back squats. People ask, how do you get into that? It is kind of self-explanatory in the sense that I get really low and I drop in and I put the thing over my back. But I know for most people that's gonna be pretty hard to do. If you can't do that, I think that's why the X3 system, other bar systems show the front squat. If you guys maybe can see it here, like I got a big bruise there. I think I was actually using this one and not this one. This one has this longer extension, this cheaper one, which is kind of good, but this thing can kind of get in your way. So it kind of is, it can be hit or miss. This thing did kind of pinch against me even on the front squat. I didn't like that. So you gotta get yourself in a certain position. The point is, you either gotta kind of fight through that or find a lighter tension you can deal with. For me, the best solution is I go heavy and put it on my back. I've even moved this thing lower in the back. It just might be hard for some people or cumbersome for some people to kind of set up. Of course, there is the option, if I don't like having multiple bars in a workout, you guys might see them for the sake of the video, but if you guys want to use the Instar bar, something like this might feel more comfortable for things like back squats. So even just investing in this relatively cheap bar just to do those might be worth it to you guys. And then so if you did the squats first, the second exercise I would recommend is some sort of deadlift. Again, keeping constant tension. I don't think there's a whole lot really to say about this. I don't go crazy super heavy. I really do more high repetitions. Again, we'll be getting to repetitions here in a second. The third exercise I just call it a side standing lunge, where I take a band, I put the thing kind of more vertically, this whatever ground plate I'm using, I strap it over my back. I have this kind of drop step lunge, doing repetitions that way. I don't know why, I just think it's kind of a little bit different having the bar over my front or back side if I'm doing things like that drop step lunge. I know X3 or other people call it like a single leg squat. I just call it a drop step lunge. I tend to prefer either, this third exercise, I either skip completely or I'll add this in a little bit here and there, and I tend to go more towards that side standing lunge with one band over my back. And the fourth one, I wouldn't even say this is, again, I'd say it might be optional, but I'm throwing it in there because it's just so convenient. Sometimes I'll pepper it in there into the mix right after, might say even the squats, whatever, if you guys want to, is just doing the basic calf raises. When I first did this, I'm like, this really doesn't feel like that much because I didn't get full dorsiflexion or full like, you know, your foot kind of curling upwards because you don't have that kind of, you can't go off the board or the thing's gonna flop out at you. But just keeping your foot flat and doing repetitions with high repetition ranges, I feel it more at the top part of my calf. Definitely works it really well. Find kind of like a lighter tension band for high repetitions seems to work the best, but I've been seeing my calves grow in development, so even though I'm not getting that nice range of motion I like to get kind of in the gym with my ankle, I think it's still working out pretty good and it's worth it for this basic simplistic setup. And then once you kind of get all four of those exercises done, of course, there's so many other things you guys could do with single joint band stuff. I'm assuming if you're like outside, you get no anchor whatsoever, you just want to do this is what you could do. All sorts of supplemental things. There's tons of exercise you guys could do if you really wanted to, glute kickbacks, hamstrings, whatever. I'm just saying this is personally what I do. I keep it very simplistic. So instead of doing all that, like I said, I keep the frequency a little bit shorter. I might do this honestly for 30 to 40 minutes, even possibly an hour, just keep going through the rounds there. But that will get exhausting really fast. Otherwise, keep it fairly short. Depends on the day, what you got more or less in the tank. And at the end, I would say optionally on this day to more so do cardio and or more core work or more abdominal oblique type stuff that you want to do. That's personally my personal recommendations because you should have more time in this workout compared to the upper body. Okay, now when it gets in the reps, sets, and rest periods, I would recommend this, I think is a little bit deviation to the X3 system. I would say 15 to 30 repetitions. I think X3 goes like 15 to 40. I like their 15 benchmark. I think that's really good. It gives you guys a nice kind of like somewhat lower intensity, higher volume-ish kind of range to kind of start with as a benchmark. I think it's good also building up that tension with bands. So 15 minimum, sometimes do I break that? Maybe, but 15 minimum is a good kind of benchmark to have in your head, especially for things even like legs or maybe even deadlifts with these. And I don't go as high as 30. I think 40 gets to be a little much. That's my personal preference. At that point, I would probably up the intensity, but I might go to 40 for some things. So 15 to 30 repetitions. The tempo, I think X3 says like a 2-2 tempo. So 2 seconds up, 2 seconds down, like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Sometimes that maybe is too slow. The point is, I just say, yeah, a slow, controlled tempo. But there are some times where maybe I'm at failure and I'll do some mini kind of quick little force reps, especially things like bicep curls, even shoulder presses. So keep that tempo more or less slow, constant tension. But if you want to do some force minor reps, especially towards the end of a set, that would certainly be an option. Also worth noting that I said this before, if you want to avoid minimal wear and tear, especially if you're using like the X3 plate, I would avoid any kind of friction going up and down and going fast on the band because it will prematurely wear out the band. And then when it comes to rest periods, I go as low as 30 seconds, as high as maybe 60 seconds or above. It just depends. If I'm supersetting between something else and I don't need this set, I don't need that rest period, then I will jump ahead and just jump right into it when I feel ready. But if there's sometimes, and you guys notice if you've been doing this, this thing jacks up your heart rate. So sometimes my heart rate, even on like one set, even bicep curls, like it's over, like it's above 150 something. I'm like, wow. So I feel that. So then I will just purposely like sit down and relax. Wait till that lowers down to like at least like, I don't know, 120-ish or something like that. Then I jump back into the next set. So kind of consider that. I'm always kind of leery. I'm not leery, but if someone had a heart condition or something like that, because this thing jacks up your heart rate for some things, if I knew someone personally, I'd be like, I would, for sure, all these things, ask your doctor, but that's certainly something that kind of pops in my brain because this thing will get your heart rate up. All right, then talking about exercise frequency, what I would do in this upper lower split, and I recommend this for a lot of my various modes of exercise, specifically as sliding bench trainer, because you always have your bases covered, hitting each each body part twice a week. I do the upper and then go into lower and then take a rest period, a rest day. So upper day, lower day, rest day. So Monday upper, Tuesday lower, and then Wednesday could be that rest day. Or if you feel really good and you feel confident and just keep going, you can go upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. all the way from like, Monday all the way to Saturday, and then take Sunday as a full day off. That would be a lot of volume. I would say just use your own discretion, listen to your body. That's the beauty of this. So even if one particular, say, lower body day, you feel really fresh, you do a lot more. The second lower body day, you're like, I did a little too much that day. Just taper it back, and that's the great thing about this. You certainly could just do like what the X3 system says and just do like one set, and that would totally be fine too. Something is definitely better than nothing. So it's really up to you to kind of find out and fine tune that overall frequency and volume, because I can't say something across the board. We're all at different walks of life and stages and responsibilities and goals, whatever. So that's something for you guys for sure to consider. And obviously, of course, listen to your body. If you're still so sore, your body, you can barely move your bicep, or it's still like feeling really tender, and it's the upper body day, yeah, maybe skip the biceps, maybe take a complete day off, but maybe skip that individual body part and allow a little more recovery for that area. So after all that's established, the next logical question is, how long should you be running or doing this program? Really, I'd say first and foremost, as long as it's being interesting and as long as it's still providing results. And for me, I've been going on over a month using this thing pretty consistently and using a lot of it, yes, in conjunction with my total gym, but I actually been dialing up a lot in this thing recently because I'm having so much fun and seeing so much results. As soon as I start seeing things just, again, not being as interesting, or I'm not feeling the same kind of feedback I am feeling right now, because it definitely might be kind of a new novel stimulus, then I'd say, yeah, kind of transition out of it, try something else, or incorporate some other exercise and movement patterns that I've already discussed in this basic framework. And because this thing is so simplistic and more conceptual based, granted this might not hit everyone's preferences in that area, this is something you could just do for a period of weeks, a month. It's totally up to you. This is very flexible, and that's why I like stuff like this. But that is it, guys. Those are simply my opinions and thoughts. You guys share yours down below in the description box. This video probably went way longer than I wanted it to. I wanted to be as brief as possible, but I wanted to cover all the bases as much as I could. So if you guys did find this all informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. Like I said, if you guys want to support me and get a physical copy of this, you'll find it in the website at some point in time, or look down below in the description box. If you guys don't have any of this equipment, also want to support me that way, definitely consider at this point or some point coming back to this video and checking out those links down below, as well as the promo codes. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video.